They monopolize the news, your views, and the channel you choose. Propaganda, visual cancer. The fox has a bushy tail, and bush tells lies and fox trots. So I don't know what's real.
I will not be deceived, nor will I believe in the propaganda. I am tuned in.
How it gets to the point where
things get to terrible places one tiny step at a time. You know, if I encroach on you and I'm sophisticated about it, I'm going to encroach 2 millimeters. I'm going to encroach right to the point where you start to protest. Then I'm going to stop. Then I'm going to wait. Then you're going to calm down. Then I'm going to encroach again right to the point where you protest. Then I'm going to stop. Then I'm going to wait. And I'm just going to do that forever. And before you know it, you're going to be back 3 miles from where you started, and you'll have done it one step at a time. And then you'll go, oh, how'd I get here? And the answer was, well, I pushed you a little farther than you should have gone, and you agreed. And so then I pushed you a little farther than you should have gone again, and you agreed. And if anybody's interested in this sort of process, and this is a horrifying book, if you want to read about how this process works, you can read a book called Ordinary Men by Robert Browning. The advantage to me being an ideologue is that I can explain everything. I can feel morally superior, and I know who my enemies are. And you know what you're supposed to do with enemies. They're not your friends, right? You move against them.
Political correctness is simply manipulating the population to silence itself. Something that I call the totalitarian tiptoe. You know you're going to Z, but if you go in too big a leap to Z, then people are going to say, what's happening? Because the change is so great. So you go as fast as you can from A to C to E to whatever. And every step is presented as in and of itself and not connected to the other steps. But if you break it down and you connect them, look what's happening. Stage one, you get people, particularly the young, because they're the adults in the world that at the time this is supposed to come in. You get them addicted to technology that they hold, holdables. You then, because you want to get in the body, you then go on the body. You do your Google Glass, you do your Apple Watch, you do your Bluetooth. And now, next, and it's happening now, you go in the body with microchips. And not only microchips that you can see, but nano microchips, which a CIA scientist told me in the late 90s was coming, which I put in my books at the time. And people said, that's ridiculous. Breathing in microchips, that's impossible. It's not with nanotechnology, it's not. Exactly what he told me is happening. And the idea, which is what we're being manipulated as a global society to do, is to connect our thinking and emotional processes to AI, so the human mind becomes AI. It's basically
Westworld.
Well, this is the point. Is you put out in movies and television programs the world you want to go into, because if you don't, the division between what people are living and where you're going is so great that division, that chasm, will get people to say what's going on. So what you do, it's called preemptive programming. That's what it's called. And what you do is you put out all these programs. Look at the AI programs and the Westworlds and the synthetic humans now. And you're basically getting people subconsciously familiar with where you want to take them, so that you're lessening the resistance. How do they manipulate this? One of the coordinates, one of the methods of manipulation, a massively important one to understand, is one I've dubbed problem, reaction, solution, where you want to change society in a way that if you do it openly, you'll get resistance, massive resistance from the population. So what you do is you create a problem covertly, you blame someone or something else for it, you pass that fake version of the event through the unquestioning, pathetic mainstream media to the people, unquestioned overwhelmingly, and certainly uninvestigated, and you want the people to react to the manufactured problem with outrage, with fear, and you want them to say, do something. What are they going to do about it? At which point you then offer solutions openly with changes in legislation and society and its structure to advance your agenda. And because of the problem, reaction, solution, you do not get the resistance here that you would have got without the manufactured problem. 9/11 is a bloody classic. Another way of describing this is ordo ab chao, the Latin motto of the 33rd degree of Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Order out of chaos. Problem, reaction, solution. Create the chaos, then offer the order, your change out of that chaos. Moreover, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus on foreign policy issues, except in the circumstances of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat. An evil exists that threatens every man, woman, and child of this great nation. We must take steps to ensure our domestic security and protect our homeland. Or actually, word for word, what was said after 9/11. I now call no problem reaction solution. This is when you don't need a real problem, you just need the public perception of a problem, i.e. weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, i.e. human-caused climate change. And then you can offer a solution to a problem that doesn't actually exist, but if enough people think it does, well, you got them. Totalitarian tiptoe, as I call it, goes in conjunction with problem, reaction, solution. This is real simple. You start at A, you know you're going to Z, but you know if you go in a big leap, the change is going to be so big and so quick that people are going to go, what's happening? What's happening? Turn that television show off. What's happening? And so you go in steps, as big as you can get away with, but not so big that you get too much of a reaction. And as this quite rightly said, you really think it would be this obvious. Well, it's becoming that obvious now as we move along, but up to this point it hasn't been, unless you looked for it. Globalization, which is the constant centralization of power, which is more and more power in the hands of fewer and fewer over more and more people. This is a totalitarian tiptoe. More and more, the globalized economy is taking over so that every country is dependent on every other country, therefore has no power of individual action and individual decision-making. Free trade, which means freedom to exploit, which means you can get sweatshop workers here to make your stuff for a few cents, and then you ship it over here and you sell it for as much as you can get. It's called free trade. Everyone's in favor of free trade. You can't be against free trade. This is also part of this globalized centralization of power, which is designed to do this, and it increasingly is doing this. It means that if you're dependent within your country or your community on things outside of your influence, then everyone is dependent on everyone else, therefore has no self-sufficient ability to make decisions in their own lives and their own communities and their own countries. And the reason that they want to do this is they want to make everyone dependent on something outside their control, because dependency equals control. It's like abundance and scarcity. We live in a world which could be incredibly abundant. Nobody should be hungry on this planet, for goodness sake. Africa could feed the bloody world. It can't even feed itself. Why? Because of the manipulation of that continent by this crowd.
Almost everything that you see in society or from official sources is fabricated or rigged. It's fictional. It's all designed to weave this artificial tapestry of beliefs and ideas and so-called truths in your mind that actually are not true and that are not based on reality. And the point of this is to create a system of control, a prison for your mind that gives you the illusion of thinking that you have freedom of thought or freedom of choice, or that you live in a democracy, for example, when in reality this entire system around you is all fabricated to force you into making certain decisions or taking certain actions or avoiding certain actions, all of which further the desires and the consolidation of power of the totalitarian regime in power. Almost nothing that you think you know, your beliefs, your truths, actually comes from first-hand experience. Almost everything that you think is true was actually told to you by someone else. When you watch the news, let's say on CNN, for example, you think that they are telling you something that's true, and then that idea of truth transfers into your belief system, and now you believe that what they said was true because they reported it, but you never saw it. You weren't there. And so you're depending on third parties to tell you what's real in the world. Well, what happens when those third parties are deliberately lying to you, or withholding information, or falsifying, or distorting information? And that's actually the system in which we live. The media, government, institutions, academia, Every sector of society is engaged in an elaborate scheme of lies and distortions, and yet they have the ambiance of apparent authority, and so they are believable by most people. You are hardwired to automatically believe those who appear to be authority sources. This is part of the human brain. This is your neurology. This is the way that you were born. It's not just authority sources, but also you're wired to accept consensus reality, which means that if enough people believe something and you find yourself in a position where you are the one person in a group that does not believe what the rest of the people believe in that group, then you are likely to change your belief, even in complete contradiction to your direct experience, because the consensus is considered a greater authority than what you see and experience with your own eyes and first-hand senses.
You've got to think for yourselves. You're all individuals.
Remember, if you teach people how to live in reality, they might become self-sufficient, and that's a huge threat to the system. So it's much better if you're a globalist government. It's much better to train people to live in these artificial constructs where you control the narrative, you feed them their information, you control the news media, you create the cultural myths, you create the language and you enforce the language, you restrict thoughts, you restrict words, and you in effect control the minds of all the people, you control their decisions, you control their votes, you control their entire belief system. And you do it without ever having to fire a gun or take anyone prisoner or shoot artillery or use tanks. You can occupy an entire nation by simply waging war on the minds of the people who live there. Because what the media has discovered is that they can fool most people very easily, at least for some period of time. Why it's so important to study actual history and to read about the Founding Fathers and the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, why these came about, where they came from, and why it was so critical for a new young nation to limit the power of government and to enshrine specific rights of individuals in the Bill of Rights. Until you really understand that, then you have no business voting in society, and that's exactly the way the system likes it. They don't want you to understand history, because anyone who does is really a threat to the future plans of the regime in power. So this is how the war on reality is waged, and it's a war that's being waged right now in your mind without your knowledge or consent.
There is a real group that realizes humanity's in so much trouble with AI and so much trouble with all the globalism and everything, and what was happening is so crazy, this anti-human mania that was being run by big tech that's still in power. The world's awake, brother. They're awake to globalism. It's over. The chain reaction from Brazil to Russia to the UK to Germany to everywhere, it's already happened. And so it matters how hard the road is for everybody. We love the children. We hope they don't go through pain, but we've showed the children the way. What I'm telling you is the fuse is already lit. See, this is the kamikaze mission. People think humanity just takes this stuff. No, the spirit of humanity manifests itself. So I'm already in the system. I've already won. And they thought it was a joke. And now they just took their death dose. Really, I'm going to kill the New World Order. That's why they call me violent. That's why they hate me. I'm not physically hurting anybody. But the information is the end. It's their end of days.
You think so?
No one can reverse it now. And if I don't do this, they have no future anyways. And that's the liberating understanding, is that if I don't commit to the truth and take this, they have no future. There's a very narrow window we've got for humanity.
I pledge allegiance to the fair and balanced truth. I will not be deceived, nor will I believe in the propaganda. I will not fall for the okie-doke. I am tuned in.
Stop sleeping, start thinking outside of the box and unplug from the matrix doctrine.